Dear Ebrima of Trust Africa, our wonderful host in the land of Teranga. Dear Akwesi, I believe you've overdone it. Thank you so much. Distinguished conveners, distinguished guests, dear young people, dear friends, and dear team. It's teamwork that makes the dream work. Salam alaikum. We meet in peace. Peace is the noble purpose of the United Nations, which was forged nearly 80 years ago in response to World War. And peace, this is the dearest wish of women this world over. Peace in our homes, peace in our communities, peace in our hearts. And what memorable days we've had here at the 4th annual gathering of the continent's homegrown philanthropy stakeholders. I want to thank you for inviting me. I love the bravery and the can-do spirit and the yes, we can determination of your sector. I thank Trust Africa and the Wits Business School, CAPSI, and everyone for having us here. And Ebrima, in particular, I'd like to thank you for your leadership and for your dedication. It really inspires me. And I certainly would like to acknowledge my board chair and mentor, Kumba Toure, who has joined us today. Kumba, thank you so much. And look, for everyone who's here, you as a participant, I've noted that you're leagues ahead when it comes to fashioning an effective philanthropy, and it's been an inspiration. So policy today. Why is that important? I am here to recount the story of a great battle, as old as Methuselah. It's a battle that's raging right here, right now, all across this magnificent continent and all across our world. And as usual, the fight is about power. It's about control. It's the age-old question. Who is the owner of the body of a woman? Who is in control of the life chances of a 10-year-old girl? In other words, what if every person on the planet, and it's now 8 billion of us, what if every woman and every girl in particular had true control over her body, her life, and her future? We of UNFPA, which is the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, believe that with control, bodily autonomy in the hands of a woman or a girl, then the possibilities for individual, for societal, for advancement in this world become infinite. Bodily autonomy, that is the foundation for gender equality, and that's essential for the prosperous, sustainable future that we all want, that we all deserve. So if we believe in human rights and we want to see that better future, then we are called to step up and defend the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls, of everyone, to stand up for the full equality of everyone. I imagine a girl who's standing at a fork in the road, and education is going to make a difference. If she's able to stay in school, she's set on a lifelong path of health and well-being, and her children and the next generation. All the evidence shows us this. However, if, as happens all too often, she's forced to drop out of school, if she's married off as a child, this is the euphemism we have for child sexual exploitation and child labor. If she's married as a girl, if she becomes pregnant while still a child, what she will face, assuredly, is a cascade of catastrophe, challenges over the course of her life, and the next generation, jeopardizing her personal health and well-being, but also that of her children, and ultimately societal prospects for prosperity. And at UNFPA, we know this girl very well. She's right here in Fatick. She's around the corner in Sudan. She is in Guatemala, and she is wondering what is going to happen to me. Someone called Aminata told me this story, and it's just fresh in my mind, in Niger. She said, "My dream was to be a nurse, and it ended when I was 15 years old. I became pregnant, and having a child at that age was a big mistake. Now I don't work. I am a school dropout. My peers are still in school, and here I am at home nursing a baby." And such a story like Aminata is telling is, in fact, common. It's the commonness of it that's so tragic. A girl's life that's turned upside down because of ignorance about her body and about her rights. When you flip that script, then that's the better path from the fork in the road. For vulnerable women and girls in particular, as a health professional, now I'm on the education side. Education is that door opener. That's what's going to make her life better, different. Better educated women are healthier, marry later, more likely to plan the number and spacing of their children, more likely to use prenatal care, to vaccinate their children, and to seek health services when necessary. Also more likely with education to participate in the formal labor market, which comes with benefits. And also education will reduce the likelihood of harmful practices like child marriage, like female genital mutilation in the next generation. Certainly, an educated woman with her own money is far less at risk from gender-based violence, far too prevalent, and that is part of that age-old battle. Now, quality education is not just book learning, ABC mathematics. Quality education has to include comprehensive sexuality education, age-appropriate, culturally sensitive, but take that girl and that boy out of ignorance. The evidence is very clear that when women and adolescent girls have the information, that translates into power. Power to govern their own reproductive rights and choices, and to exercise their agency in other areas with better opportunities throughout their lives. Societies then, as this magnifies and multiplies, will flourish. But yes, there's a catch. And why is it that there's always a catch? But there's a catch. Right now, sexual and reproductive health and rights, the phraseology of gender equality, Sustainable Development Goal number 5, and women's rights more broadly are facing relentless, growing pushback in practically every single place around the globe. And I have to be frank, the opposition to women's rights is powerful, it's well organized, and it is well financed. It's active at the national and at the regional and at the global levels, and every time that UNFPA sits in the Commission on Population and Development, as we sit with UN Women in the commission that deals with women's rights, they're in the front row, ready to object to full equality for women and girls. Now, this anti-rights, anti-choice movement has a strategic agenda developed since 2017. We think we have our strategic plan. Part of their strategic plan back then, which now we see being fulfilled, and it is well financed, let me underline that again, is to demonize our LGBTIQ plus transgender people. It's to erase issues of racial and ethnic majority concerns, and I never use the term minority. Racial and ethnic indigenous peoples' concerns from the multilateral system. It's an agenda that's aimed to systematically roll back rights. And this type of anti-human dignity movement demands a response from philanthropy. Will philanthropy stand up against such a well-organized, well-funded opposition? I repeat, will philanthropy stand up for human rights? Because we need a philanthropic effort that is better organized, not just as well organized as the opposition, that is more adept, that is more combative, more visible, and just as unrelenting. The silent majority should not take for granted that you will win just on the morals of the occasion. And the stakes could not be higher for women and girls in societies. Today, 44%, almost half, of women cannot make their own choices about their reproductive health, about whether or not they can use contraception without the consent of a male, and whether or not to have sex is not under their decision-making power. Our research at UNFPA shows that nearly half of the world's pregnancies were not intended. And many of these unintended pregnancies, of course, are a happy occasion for the family, but nearly half end in abortion, an unsafe abortion, which is a concern for developing countries. Now, as I look across Africa today, 550 women are going to die due to complications of pregnancy and childbirth. Every single day. Maternal mortality is a fight that is your fight. And unsafe abortion is part of that hemorrhage that the doctor is going to write on the certificate for fear of policy, for fear of law that keeps women and girls subjected to coerced sexual activity and then blames them for the consequences. This is a wretched situation, and it's one that each and every one of us has to pay attention to. When I think about these deaths and the tears in the 550 families for their daughter, for their sister, for their mother, for the other children that she leaves behind, I know that many of these deaths were entirely preventable if policy allowed transportation to take that woman from her island community in the boat to where she can have a safe cesarean section. If policy allowed comprehensive sexuality education so that a girl could say no when the neighbor drops by, when there are issues related to sexual and gender-based violence. So I want to emphasize that when I say 550 women will die today, many of these are not women, they are girls. They're girls who should never have been pregnant in the first place. Now, it's so troubling. Akwesi mentioned I've served in many countries in our continent. And I remember being so startled the first time as a pediatrician, as a doctor, you approach a 13, 14-year-old who's pregnant and you say, you know, what happened? And now I've heard it so much, but I just remember my sort of disorientation, my shock, when she tells you, I don't know. Teach a girl to be silent, teach a girl to be acquiescent, and teach her to subject herself to male dominance. She knows nothing about her biology. It's a stomach that's inside. That's it. And then, of course, force her out of school in shame, stigma, discrimination. The complications that I mention of pregnancy and childbirth include fistula. And how many of us have seen women stigmatized as they leak urine or feces because of a rupture of their womb? They're too small to carry a pregnancy. So luckily, UNFPA and others are able to help with surgical attention, and this can be very transforming for women and girls who have that condition. My main point, though, is that ignorance is not innocence, right? Often ignorance is deadly, and indeed, with complications from pregnancy and childbirth being the leading cause of death among African adolescent girls, we all have to sit up and take notice. Until very recently, for example, the world did not even measure pregnancy in girls 14 and under. They were completely invisible. And we found out that there are 500,000 births across the world to girls who are in the age range 10 to 14. The battle rages on, and I believe that the controversy around comprehensive sexuality education is a manufactured controversy, because we know that it's protective for girls and boys. And in far too many parts of Africa, opposition is growing because of coordinated disinformation campaigns that are propagated by those same well-organized, well-funded global anti-gender, anti-rights, anti-humanity opposition people that I mentioned. So my dear friends, sexual and reproductive health and rights is going to be a key variable for prosperity in Africa. When I look around post-COVID, conflict, right? I just heard from Dr. Nahid Tubia, who is from Sudan. The conflagration that we have in Africa leading to movements, displacement of people, it's always women and girls who bear the brunt of whatever the disaster is. And we have to add climate-related disaster to that list. It's setting back progress, and things are not going well in the neighborhood. Luckily, there are things that we can do to intervene, that we should do to intervene. And I believe that as we see the dramatic effects of these trends, including hunger and malnutrition, whether it's drought, whether it's flood, the newest Russian actions to blockade the Ukraine grain, and that's so vital to the African food supply chain. All of this means that we have to work in concert better together. For us at UNFPA, we've informed ourselves because we're a data shop. We confer with governments in developing countries about census, for example, and that means constructing the question. It also means modernizing the approach to information for prioritizing for those choices that we talked about yesterday. For us, the three priorities are to make sure that family planning is in the hands of every woman and adolescent girl who requests it, to prevent maternal deaths, and I've said a lot about this, and also to zero gender-based violence. It's a question of rights and dignity, and harmful practices like child marriage and certainly female genital mutilation will end in our lifetime. We use quality data to help us reach those who are in greatest needs, leaving no one behind. Speaking to stakeholders in philanthropy, your investments make a difference. They are catalytic. You do have a range of creativity, experimentation, and innovation. And right now, universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights is an important investment for everyone throughout their lives. And it's been wonderful to see a group of African heads of state, including here in Senegal, who, under the leadership of Madame ex-President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, devise Men Against Gender-Based Violence initiatives. Now, for every dollar that you invest in family planning, you can save a government $3 in the cost for pregnancy-related and newborn care. And over time, the total package that dollar leads to, if part of it is information and services, including family planning, according to Guttmacher and others, the yield is as much as $120 in health and economic benefits by helping girls to stay in school and boosting women's lifetime earning potential. Today, more than 200 million women and adolescent girls still cannot readily access contraception, and this is not just a logistical problem, it is a policy issue. We have seen significant progress in maternal health in recent decades, uneven, but the march is forward, and also with the lifetime pace of progress regarding the statistics for the continent. However, you know, it's not really a big mystery what makes a difference. It's the policy and will environment. One objective is to double the number of midwives, for example, because midwives are on the ground in the communities. The medical system has never embraced this, and it's time now to assure ourselves that young people see the excitement of a career as a midwife or a nurse, as well as innovative, low-cost solutions, like a new AI-powered ultrasound device. This can be used by a community health worker to identify early warning signs during pregnancy and avoid, hopefully, complications. Working with academia, UNFPA has estimated that more than 115 billion US dollars are needed over the course of the next 10 years to really have major impact on maternal death in the 120 priority countries, most of whom are right here. When you look at the bottom 10 countries for death during pregnancy and childbirth, except for Afghanistan, it's Africa. When you look at the bottom 20, except for Afghanistan and Myanmar. So this is something that we can join hands to do something about. And I'd like to say that African philanthropy is an important source of financing. However, you're also an important source of know-how, of innovation, of what I would call hope. The examples that were given to us during the course of our meeting of the type of social change that you're espousing is going to accelerate development. And more, I think foundations do align what you're doing with government priorities and with the global sustainable development goals. This has a big influence on what happens in the international sphere. Generosity and informal philanthropy, we've also elucidated during this meeting, continue to play a significant role in African societies as they have for centuries, and that spirit of generosity really comes forward during times of crisis. And we saw this with Ebola, we saw this with the HIV pandemic, and the role of the grandmothers has been highlighted. And now, as we see devastating flood and concomitantly devastating drought, it's again these informal philanthropic efforts that make a difference. And I would like to include the diaspora in this type of community, because as Africa's proud and powerful sixth region, we too have to play our role in the development of a continent that was ravaged by lack of bodily autonomy, by the enslavement of so many of our forebears. So I think it's been important to stimulate that diaspora giving, funding, and time. And I think there's going to be a lot of potential in that kind of dynamic. I've seen that the African Philanthropy Network here estimates the potential giving pool of wealthy individuals at $2.8 billion per year, possibly as high as $7 billion. This is something we can go after, because you can imagine how fast and far we could move, especially the gender equality needle, if we target those investments appropriately, if we particularly focus on reproductive health and rights and on girls' education. I'd just like to close by highlighting strategic partnerships that we're extremely grateful for. And we've worked, for example, with African philanthropy in the discussions on taxing and the financial flows that so many of you have put on the map and been very vocal in visibilizing. We've worked with foundations such as the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Anonymous Philanthropy, which provided $50 million US to our UNFPA supplies program just a year ago. And this funding is strengthening health systems to reduce the unmet need for family planning in the wake of a funding gap. And as a result, the contraceptives provided through the UNFPA Supplies Partnership have helped to avert over 5 million unintended pregnancies and 114,000 maternal and child deaths over the course of 2 years. This also translates to preventing unsafe abortion, more than 1.5 million, and to reaching more than 13 million users with quality modern methods of contraception. We have done everything possible to work with young people and to have their ideas incorporated into what their vision is for how sexual and reproductive health should be deployed. Working with the Maternity Foundation to launch a COVID module within their Safe Delivery app. This helped midwives and other healthcare personnel to protect themselves during COVID, as well as women and newborns from the virus. This is an app that's been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times and is used in more than 40 countries, many of them here. Fondation Chanel is an important global strategic partner on gender equality. And we've also conceived of a Power of Choice initiative with them that's aiming to reach women and girls directly on the ground. And with SIF, because of their interest in adolescent health, they've recently committed $5 million through a bond program. This bond is being tested in Kenya, and it looks very promising. There are a whole host of other very important initiatives, including working with you on advocacy. And I think that's how you can really help, by continuing to advocate for increased attention to support sexual and reproductive health and rights, and more financial and human resources to strengthen national health systems and the supply chains. And we saw the collapse during COVID. There are critical dimensions beyond the health system as well, though, and I think use your influence and power on employment, on the digital technology equation, and on economic empowerment opportunities. With Ukraine on the map and so much else, official development assistance is on the decline, and that's affecting our programming. So I think the ideas that you've had about stimulating domestic resources as a continuing renewable potential source of funding and financing needs to emphasize maternal health and family planning and young people's services going forward. So now is a time when we should stand strong. We should stand shoulder to shoulder, basing what we do on human decency, on human rights. And this applies to everyone, whether it's a woman or a girl with a disability, an ethnic or religious majority/minority, people living in rural areas who are at higher risk, and every woman everywhere. The prevalence of gender-based violence is ubiquitous, and an end to child marriage and female genital mutilation, and attention to survivors. It is time for Mother Africa to claim all of her children, especially her girl children, and stand united in her favor, and to stand united against xenophobia and racism and discrimination and any patriarchal pattern. For us at UNFPA, we will stand with you, and we will stand for rights and choices wherever we may be. We need to stand together for the full dignity of LGBTIQ+ people in all their sexual diversity. That is their right. Full equality and accessibility for people who live with disabilities. That's their right. Ending FGM now in our lifetime, stopping child marriage now and sexual exploitation of women and girls now, not 20, 30, or 50 years from now. Now. And I think you could examine the medical apartheid, as mentioned, that really shocked me during COVID, how we failed as a health system and how Africa got pushed to the back of the line. The vaccine inequity that my dear brother, Dr. Tedros, spoke about at the World Health Organization is something that needs to be rectified, and you can help to end that now. Certainly, the United Nations will stand ready to partner with you. For us, we're helping to advance the Afrodescendiente agenda and combat racism and discrimination. As we stand for the rights of indigenous people, we also provide technical support to the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which is a new post-Durban process. We're going to continue to push back against the pushback and to keep moving forward, which means hearing your voice among all the voices that speak for the most left behind populations. None of us accomplishes anything solo. And I've served on the Trust Africa board. It's been my honor, along with our current chair, learned so much from Madame Aisha Badjialo and other giants like Bishop Malusi and Asefa Bekele. Throughout, from the reception when I walked in to the operations and accounts and program people, I stood in awe of that staff, willing, imaginative, and capable. And I'd like to thank all of you who, in whatever part of the world you're working, is promoting that sense of imagination and capacity, especially among your younger staff. I have to say that Teranga was alive and well the whole time that I've been back in Senegal, and I'd like to thank the hotel team, and in particular, our wonderful interpreters. Thank you so much for what you've done. And I to my own colleagues at the United Nations. My UNFPA colleagues are committed. They always say we're passionate, and that's true. And I hope you've had a chance to chat with Dr. Senen Hunton and Nafi Diop and Sophie Senekan and all of us here who are committed to rights and choices. And our image is of a world that's welcoming, a life that's a whole lot better for a 10-year-old girl. So thank you to my colleagues. So let's not keep that a secret. Let's move forward to greater peace and prosperity, because peace and prosperity is what she wants for herself, for her family, for her community, and for our world. It's a battle, and we are going to win. A luta continua. Thank you so much.